In a shocking turn of events, the Iranian government has fired a volley of ballistic missiles at Israel. We're going to talk about what exactly these are, why they're doing it, and most importantly, what is going to happen next. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's get into it. Okay, if you appreciate my independent analysis, please subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it tells the YouTube algorithm that I'm not some crazy partisan hack. Okay. So Iran has expanded the conflict in the Middle East. This is likely in response to Israel's ground invasion of Hezbollah. Iran has launched a volley of ballistic missiles that target sites across Israel. Obviously, Israel's air defenses have attempted to shoot down the missiles, but one of the problems is that they're ballistic missiles. And ballistic missiles are very expensive, but they are also very, very fast. And the problem that air defenses have is that in a lot of cases, they are moving too quickly for standard air defenses to intercept them, right? And so that's likely the case here, where Iranian ballistic missiles are able to travel very quickly, or at least the warheads are able to get up to a very high trajectory. Let's see, re-entry vehicles enter the Earth's atmosphere at high velocities on the order of 6 to 8 kilometers per second, right? So you're looking at a really, really high speed, hard to intercept weapon system. And that's not an accident, right? The Iranians likely consider that drone flight they launched against Israel to be sort of a warning shot. Again, the other time we've seen Iranian ballistic missile tech employed was against targets in the Red Sea, right? Iranian-backed Houthis were using these to try to sink ships and block off the Red Sea. This is, of course, it's a huge escalation, but it is not an unexpected one, right? The U.S., you might recall, had warned its diplomatic staff to seek shelter several hours ago. Right, the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem directed government employees and their families to shelter in place until further notice. They actually sent them home, likely because they believed the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem would be a large target, right? Israeli civilians were in bomb shelters nationwide before the strike. And shortly thereafter, Israelis received official notice that they could come out of the shelter. So it seems to be, intelligence indicates that this was a one-and-done volley. But as we've seen, the Iranians almost certainly learning from the Russians in that if you want to conduct these kind of large-scale strikes, you need to overwhelm air defenses through massed attacks. So we're going to take a look. Here is some video of the launch, or purportedly, right? And you can see that a large number of these ballistic missiles launching along their trajectory. And generally what's going to happen is, just like a rocket ship, the rocket is going to burn fuel, get it to altitude, and then it's going to release, and the warhead is going to fall down in accelerating as it does so. So think of it like a rocket ship that's being sent upward into the atmosphere, and then it's going to fall down at a very, very high velocity. But you see here the strategy of overwhelming air defenses by launching these waves, right? Now, this is from Middle East Observer. Purportedly, the targets... let's see if we can turn this off real quick. There you go. Purportedly, the targets included an airbase, as well as believed to be Israeli intelligence facilities. Guys, if you see a ballistic missile attack like this is not where you should be. You should be taking shelter immediately. If nothing else, get down on the ground. Do not film with your phone. I don't know what else to tell you, right? But you can see, again, this is a large volley of ballistic missiles, some of which are likely trying to be intercepted. But you see that because of their rapid trajectory and because they're massed, that only a portion are getting shot down. See, there was an example of one that appeared to have been intercepted, but you can literally see these other missiles, these other warheads falling to the ground and striking their targets. And you can also see that the level of precision is good, not great, right? They seem to be clustered with approximately the same radius that they were launched with, but this is its own problem because Israel's a small country, so you're never that far from a civilian area. And this kind of use of these weapon systems to target civilian areas is it could be a war crime. Now, again, right now, the reports are that there are very few casualties. That doesn't mean that so there's two theories as to why that could be. Just real quick, of course, if you want to support the channel, you guys know that sponsors are not touching me, that I'm covering some of these other global conflicts. So I depend on you guys to be my sponsors, right? Keep me off of those Russian payrolls. Trust me, the Russians are not exactly beating down my door to buy me. But I have you guys. So become a member, combatvetnews.com. Works exactly like Patreon. You get 2 members only videos a week with uncensored combat footage, as well as the Q&A, golden recognition, depending on your tier. Check it out. Link is in the description. Okay, so let's talk about the intent and then where things could go. It sounds like the Iranians did not launch this stuff like with the drone strikes, where they intended an interception to happen, where they intended to sort of test the air defenses. Instead, this ballistic missiles, very hard to interdict, very expensive, and the fact that the Iranians use these indicates they wanted them to hit their targets. Now, it sounds like there were very few casualties. There aren't really reports that they were targeting major urban areas, so not Jerusalem, not Tel Aviv. And so there's 2 possibilities. One is that the Iranians deliberately sent them into open terrain, meaning that this would be a show of force, more of a show of force and less of an actual attack. Because again, the Iranians know that targeting large Israeli population centers is going to put the Israelis in a position where they have to defend their people, right? And they say, and that may be an escalation they don't want. The other possibility is, again, that instead of targeting open areas, they targeted things like air bases and military infrastructure, literally acting as sort of a deep strike support for Hezbollah. This would also make a lot of sense because we know Iran it considers itself the sponsor of Hezbollah, providing them a lot of their funding, a lot of their training. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, very involved. The Iranian ambassador, in fact, had one of those Hezbollah pagers that blew up. So this may be them saying, listen, you're launching this ground invasion against Hezbollah. Netanyahu went in front of the UN and said, this isn't about Hezbollah. This isn't about Hamas. This is about Iran and Iran's efforts to stop us from partnering with the Saudis to build a sort of pan-Middle Eastern alliance or cooperation. That prospect, right, is something Iran's trying to ruin. And so they're likely targeting these air bases and saying, listen, you want to go after our proxies in this ground war. They don't have air forces, but we do. So we're going to go after your air bases. We're going to go after your intelligence centers. We're going to go after your military logistics with the only weapon that can reach out and touch you reliably, which is their ballistic missiles. That's another possibility. Again, hopefully, there can still be off-ramps to this escalation. This is pretty dangerous. Iran is deep in the fuck around phase. I'm sort of shocked that no one has that they haven't found out yet. Because again, I think it's important to note that officially Hezbollah and Iran are totally disconnected. Officially, they have nothing to do with each other, right? And what is the point of having these proxy forces if instead of, this is the opposite of having proxies. Normally, proxies are supposed to provide insulation, right? Political distance. So when Hezbollah does something stupid, like bait the Israelis into a ground invasion, right? Iran gets to back away from their proxies and say, well, it wasn't us, it was Hezbollah. It was this proxy militia group. But when Iran is actually the ones who have to commit their forces to back Hezbollah to enter a conflict that they weren't actually technically a party to, that is where things get much more complicated. And now they found themselves in some ways dragged into this war. Again, they could have backed out if they wanted to. They could have said Hezbollah's gone off the chain. We're not going to involve ourselves in this. But it says that they want to. They want to be involved. And this is a core part of their strategy of ensuring that reframing the conflict, right? Because right now you have what we would consider moderate or possibly Sunni Middle Eastern nations like Jordan and like Saudi Arabia, like the Qataris, sort of pulling together, not with Israel. They never say that, but rowing in the same direction, right? They are friends of the United States as Israel is. And so this is increasingly a tightened Middle Eastern alliance. Then you have the Shia factions, the Shia countries, with Iran as kind of their pole. Again, you see the Houthis, you see the Yemenis, you see certain factions within Syria and within Iraq are all dominated by Iranian-backed Shia forces. And so for Iran, they are looking and they're saying, hey, how do we make sure that this conflict becomes, Jews versus Muslims? That's what they want, because then in that case, none of the other Muslim countries will be able to do a partnership with the great enemy, the Jews, and none of the other, and instead the loyalty will be towards the true defenders of Islam, the Iranians. And again, this isn't my way of saying that it's right or wrong, that there's good guys and bad guys, that the Israelis have done absolutely nothing wrong, right? There is no country on planet Earth who doesn't make strategic calculus and make decisions, some of which I deeply don't agree with. But you should understand why these things are actually happening. That is the most important thing. Now, where do we go from here? There's two paths. One is that the Israeli government says, we finally have our casus belli, our reason to go after Iran directly. Now with what? That's the problem. The Israelis may not have the weapons systems to throw at Iran. Iran's a big country and Israel's a small country. And they don't share a ground border, which is actually kind of a problem, right? The Israelis may say, listen, we're going to shuck this off. We're going to focus on Lebanon. We're going to kick Hezbollah in the teeth. We're going to get them out of southern Lebanon. Remember, they occupied southern Lebanon for many years, which was not a great look. The international community, again, just like the Russians, you can't go in and occupy someone else's sovereign territory. You certainly can't annex it. But if they're going in, they're going to tear up Hezbollah and diminish their capabilities and then pull back out. That would be, again, something the international community would stomach a little bit more, to say, listen, there's a militia group. They're not a state actor. We're not after the Lebanese state. We're going in. We're wiping these guys out. We're going to come out, right? And the hope is that Israel just focuses on the two Iranian proxies they are fighting. But increasingly, it sounds like they want to solve the big Iranian problem, and they want to solve it right now. And this is pretty tough. This is a tough position for the Israelis to be in, but it's even tougher for the United States because we're going into an election year. The Israeli policies in Gaza have never been less popular. They've never been, and the Democratic Party in the United States is split between a very militantly pro-Israeli faction and a faction that says that is a range of beliefs that range from, I have serious problems with how the Israeli military runs Palestine, right, and governs Palestine, all the way to the Palestinians are right and the Israelis are wrong and we need Israel to not exist. So this is the problem with this spectrum that the Democratic Party, the current White House, and the current candidate for the White House are dealing with, is that their party is really cannot form a consensus on actions here. And the fact that the Israelis are choosing now to make this escalation is sort of insane and is not making them any friends. And I also think the Israelis may realize and believe that they'll get more support from a Republican administration who will give them carte blanche to do what they want. Because again, the Republican Party has been very clear, staunchly pro-Israel. The wing of the anti-Israeli Republican Party is much, much smaller and much crazier than the other side. And so, not by much, but they are pretty crazy. And so where do you end up with, right? So the Israelis may say, listen, we think that we're going to have a Republican administration. We think we're going to have their backing. We think they're not going to ask questions about using force at a large scale. I'm not really sure. The Israelis may also just be at a point where they say, we just have to keep fighting. Again, Netanyahu may want this constant, persistent state of war so that he doesn't have to be held accountable for the serious corruption issues he was facing prior to October 7th. So it may just simply be political survival. Now, again, you may ask yourself, wow, we're going to kill a lot of civilians and a non-trivial amount of Israel's own soldiers to preserve the leadership's political fortunes. And to that I say, welcome to politics. It is run entirely by self-absorbed narcissists. And the sooner you understand that, the better you'll be able to understand their actions. So I'm going to keep you guys posted as we learn more about what's happening here. But until next time, thanks to our Colonel tier members like Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Gaius Martin, Gina Cuesta, Chris Gorsuch, Fran Zacharias, L90, and Petra Tororu, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you so much. See you in the next one. Cheers.